This is hard work.
Hello there, and as usual, I'm Aaron from Let's Stay Gamers, and welcome. Battlefield 1942, now 16 years old. Oh my god. 16 years ago, I got this game off my dad, and every night after school, I would rush home to battle in various scenarios involving tanks, aircraft, ships, and some really intense infantry combat. And at that time, no game had anything on this. Nothing offered a multiple combined arms experience like this. You had Call of Duty that was purely infantry, and you had other CS type games where they were based on the Wolfenstein engine and day defeat source, and they really were nothing on 1942. Now, with the release of the new Battlefield being set in World War II, I thought we'd have a look through the 1942's type features, see what it was all about, show you some of my favourite elements, and talk about some things that have really changed over the series. Now, first of all, I want to talk about aircraft. Now, in the later games, you sit there waiting on a menu for your aircraft to spawn into the middle of the sky. Back in 1942, they would always spawn at your base or an airfield, and you'd have a queue of players there that were very vulnerable to attack. The second thing I loved about 1942's aircraft was the ammunition. You can see it's depleting down there, and when that gets down to nothing, you have to land your aircraft, as well as the repairing in the sky. You can't repair in the sky, you've got to get back on the ground, get your wrench out, and start doing a little bit of repair work. In later games, it's simple circles of death. You spin your aircraft around, you rearm, come back in, re-health, come back in, and it's just not the same sort of experience, and I hope they've learned that in the new Battlefield game. Now, moving on to Omaha Beach. This was what I felt Battlefield's first sort of take on let's see what we can do by narrowing 64 players into a very tight environment. Now, they really wanted to pay hell to the Allied forces here because these bunkers on multiplayer were full of infantry with machine guns, sniper rifles, everything they could do to stop you. Getting up that beach involved a lot of coordination with your team. And once you made it up the beach, you then had to fight your way through the villages. And in a lot of the Battlefield maps, they experimented with different sorts of combinations. In some maps, they would force players through particular routes, basically concentrating all the action in this particular area that they learned for the rest of the series. You can see it in a lot of maps that they build in the later Battlefields. And there was also these very wide open terrain areas where the player themselves can really choose how they want to confront an attack or a situation. And by having both of these options open to a player, it created a great little environment. Now, talking about tanks, something I really loved about 1942's tanks was the machine gunners on the roof. There was nothing more satisfying as a tank was going past, jumping out with your submachine gun from an alleyway and hosing down the machine gunner off the top. It was a great little experience. The thing I didn't like about the machine gunners, or the tanks in this case, is the arc of fire. Just look how much drop we get on each shell. As I'm engaging this Tiger tank, I have to really account. It's almost like I'm an artillery piece. It's not going very well for me at all, and these tanks were extremely spongy to tank fire. So you can see if I landed multiple shots on that tank, the best way to really take a tank out in 1942 was to spam grenades at it. You'd get all your infantry members around it, and next minute they were all lobbing grenades, and the grenades would do a significant amount of damage. The rocket launchers were alright, but you usually went through the whole ammunition clip of rockets and had to be rearmed before you could really cause some damage to a tank. Now, moving on to pointless vehicles, this is a strange topic that in the later Battlefields they don't really seem to have. In 1942 they had a lot of transport vehicles that were purely transport, or they had a small machine gun on, and these were used just to get players very quickly between locations. They would respawn very fast and be very available. In later games, these vehicles tended to really need to serve some purpose. They had a machine gun mounted to them, they had things that were mounted to them that couldn't really do anything, and the troop transport capacity really wasn't that great either. So I really hope they learn it for 1942 and just kind of add more transport, getting players around the map a lot quicker and getting them into the heat of the action a lot faster as well. Now, after this, I want to talk about the medical system. As a character in Battlefield 1942, the only way you could gain health was from a medical cabinet or from other players, and this meant you had to be very careful if you took damage in an engagement. In most cases you would pull back, giving the enemy a chance to push up on your position and take you out. Also, let's talk a little bit about emplacements. In 1942, emplacements were pretty much all over the place. You had flak weapons, you had cannon turrets, you had things all over the map there to help you take out enemy players at very short notice, because the anti-tank capacities weren't particularly great. Jumping in one of these bunkers or jumping on a machine gun post to eliminate a squad of infantry very quick was very efficient indeed, and I really hope they take note from that as well and give us a few more emplacements in key locations to really change up the battlefield. For instance, when an emplacement's in a building, the fight for that emplacement in that building gets very intense, because if it's a good machine gun position overlooking a street and that emplacement is set up, players will fight over it to get in there and lock that area of territory down, and I really hope you pay attention to that in the next Battlefield installment. Now, briefly going over explosive devices. In 1942, they were very simple. They didn't really stick to vehicles too well. Sometimes, if you were lucky, you could make yourself a suicide-like Jeep and whatnot, and the mines themselves weren't really that much better. And the final thing I wanted to talk about was the weapons themselves. All of the infantry combat was very, very tinny. The weapon sounds are nothing on what they've got today. That is something they've done in the right direction. The sounds, the way you attack people. I'm not a big fan of the super jumping knife animations now. Back in the day, you had to slice a man up 2 times before you even got close to him, and he could sometimes would turn around and hose you down if your latency was a bit poo, but, you know, never mind in some of these situations. And holding these points was a very sort of interesting experience. You were often shouting to your teammates, trying to get them up here, and most of them were 12-year-old kids like yourself, and no one really understood what the hell was going on. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.